Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. This is the sign that was supposedly on former President Harry Truman's Oval Office. The buck stops here. I think it's a statement that says a lot. We in Africa, I think we have had a problem of colonialism, slavery, and I think we have got a hangover of that. This is a comment that I received on one of the WhatsApp groups. Colonialism has not ended in Africa. We still speak the language of the colonizers, educate in their schools, worship their gods, and even aspire to be like them. We still carry the mentality of slaves. We choose to. We have got to accept that slavery was a reality. Whether or not we want to move on, it's up to us. I think we have failed to take ownership of our own destiny. We failed to be masters of our own destiny. And I think slavery, colonialism have become a convenient scapegoat. We blame it on slavery, on the colonizers, and never want to accept. Even for a country like Zimbabwe, we have been independent for the last 43 years. And yet, we still want to blame the West for our problems. It has become a convenient scapegoat. It's tragic that so many people are easily fooled into believing that. When the West imposed the sanctions in 2001, Robert Mugabe dismissed the sanctions as a non-event. He came up with his look east policy. But when that failed to revive the Zimbabwe economy, he reverted back to sanctions as the problem, the root cause of Zimbabwe's economic problems. The truth is, Zimbabwe's economic meltdown was caused by gross mismanagement and rampant corruption. And even if we accept that that the sanctions were to blame for some of our problems, we still have got to say, okay, what is it that we had control over? Mismanagement, corruption. The question then is, why are we obsessed with trying to end the sanctions and yet are doing nothing about those things that we ourselves are responsible for? Mismanagement and corruption. It is ridiculous. We've got the same problem. In another group, one of the guys was saying the issue had arisen out of my statement saying that Triple C have failed to implement even one democratic reform in 23 years, 5 of which include the GNU. And this is not the first time I've heard that response. The reply came, how ironic that you are a victim of ZANU-PF's negligence, lack of accountability, corruption, to a point of leaving the country, but you still support the regime. I don't know what is it I've done to say to deserve that I support the regime. And he continues, instead of sympathizing with Triple C for endeavoring to maneuver under the ruthlessness of ZANU-PF, you attack Triple C. This is ridiculous. Of course it is ridiculous. We cannot accept that Triple C were voted into power for an express purpose of implementing the democratic reforms so that we can get out of the situation we were in, i.e. ZANU-PF rigging the elections. And after 23 years, we have got to be able to say, well, what has Triple C done? Why have they not implemented even one meaningful democratic reform? And yet, for some reason, we are locked out of that. We've got to blame ZANU-PF. Just as much ZANU-PF is blaming the West. Yes, ZANU-PF is a tyrannical regime. Yes, ZANU-PF rigged elections. But what is it that Triple C should have done to stop rigging? That is what we should be focusing on. After 23 years, why is it that Triple C have failed to implement even one meaningful democratic change to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections? That is what we should be focusing on. And yet, some people cannot see that. They refuse to see that. They have got ZANU-PF to blame, and they focus on ZANU-PF. This is totally meaningless. So why did we elect Triple C then? What is the point of having the opposition? Risking life and limb this last 23 years if Triple C have got no responsibility whatsoever. I think this sign that President Truman had is an expression of confidence. It's saying to me, I'm the master of my own destiny. I cannot keep on looking for somebody else to blame for my failures. I think it's a sign that if I had my way, Mnangagwa should have on his desk, and Chamisa should have on his desk. Not only that, every citizen there or they should have it on their own desk. We in Africa need that sign to remind us that we must be masters of our own destiny. We can't always be looking for somebody to blame for our own failures. Zimbabwe has been independent for the last 43 years now. We have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And this is the root cause why Zimbabwe is a failed state today. Yes, ZANU-PF has been rigging the elections. But in that 43 years, we also cannot deny that there's been many opportunities to implement democratic reforms and stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. The question then arises, why have we failed to take advantage of those opportunities? This is why it comes back to Triple C. If the only way we're going to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections is by implementing the democratic reforms, then after 23 years, with not even one token reform implemented, we have to look at why have we failed to implement reforms. That should be our starting point. To keep on saying it's ZANU-PF, yes, ZANU-PF is the one rigging the elections, but we had the opportunity to implement reforms and stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. Why have we failed to do so? And the answer clearly is that we have got an opposition party that has proven to be corrupt and incompetent. They have failed to implement even one meaningful reform. Let's argue about that. If you are denying it, say it. Tell me what reforms they have implemented. To keep on referring to the ruthlessness of ZANU-PF. Yes, we know ZANU-PF is ruthless, but in 43 years, surely you don't want to tell me that we did not have the opportunity to implement the reforms. The reforms are important. In 2008, 2013, we had the opportunity to implement the reforms. That is a fact. That was our get out of jail card. We failed to use it. Right now, there is a distinct possibility that SADC will stand up to ZANU-PF and tell the regime the 23rd August elections are not free, fair, and credible. This will give us a golden opportunity to have a national transition authority, and its primary task will be to implement the democratic reforms. And if we're going to have that opportunity, surely we must appoint people, competent people who will implement those reforms. And therefore, then the ability to focus on the task on hand, i.e., responsible, competent individual who implement the reforms, is important. We cannot turn around and pretend that Nelson Chamisa and his friends in the MDC, Triple C now, failed the nation, failed to implement even one token reform last time when they had the golden opportunity to do so. If they failed last time, surely it doesn't make any sense at all that we should allow them to implement reforms again, to play a role in the National Transition Authority. They should not be allowed in. And I think it is ridiculous that we should allow them in. We have got to be masters of our own destiny. And being a master of your own destiny demands that we take responsibility. the idea that we have failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections is important. And I think this is an issue that is the number one issue for the people of Zimbabwe right now. Because without reforms, without free, fair, and credible elections, we are not going to get out of this mess. And delivering those reforms to make sure that we have free, fair, and credible elections should be the responsibility of every Zimbabwean out there. We should not be looking at somebody else. We should be looking at what is it we need now to make sure that that is successful. And I believe we need the National Transition Authority, and we need to make sure that we have competent individuals in that National Transition Authority. CCC and ZANU-PF cannot be in that National Transition Authority because the way in the GNU, they failed to implement even one meaningful reform. And for the last 43 years, they are the ones who have led us to where we are today, where for the second time in 2 decades, the country finds itself in a position where we do not have a legitimate government. This happened in 2008, and this is happening now because we failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And so we've got to resort to a National Transition Authority, some interim arrangement to bridge the gap while we sort out why we failed to hold free and fair and credible elections. This opportunity, we must make the most of it. And making the most of it means we must make sure that we've got competent individuals who will implement those reforms. I think that the idea that we should accommodate ZANU-PF and CCC is completely out of the question. It's ridiculous. That idea must be ruled out. And emphatically, ZANU-PF and CCC have their own agenda. That's why they failed to implement even one meaningful reform during the last GNU. We have got to stand up and say, no, this is what we want. We are now masters of our own destiny. I think most of us out there stand up and say, we are going to be masters of our own destiny. Is the day Zimbabwe will really truly become independent. At the present moment, I think we are not, because most of us are willing to blame, if you're ZANU-PF supporters, the West for all the country's problems. And if you're a CCC supporter, to blame ZANU-PF for all the country's problems. The truth of the matter is, there are certain things that ZANU-PF can do, and they have not done those things. And there are many things that CCC can do, and they have not done those things. And as a citizen, we are responsible for holding them to account for what is in their power to do, and not always be looking for an excuse why they failed to do so. There is no excuse why ZANU-PF rigged and has been rigging elections. Just as much as there is no excuse why CCC has failed to implement even one meaningful democratic change in the last 23 years to stop ZANU-PF rigging the elections. That is the truth. And I think they need to take ownership of their own failures. And I think we also need to hold them to account and stop giving excuses for not doing so. If we fail to implement the democratic reforms this time, we have got to take ownership of that. We, the people of Zimbabwe, have got to take ownership of that. And I seriously hope that this time will not be found wanting on that point. Thank you and have a nice day.